What's up, faithful? Welcome back to the Saloon presented by Cisco. I'm your 49ers team reporter, Briana Jeannel. I'm sitting down with digital editor, Brooke Evans, and we're here to start our draft coverage leading up to the end of this month where the 49ers pick starting at number 27. But before we dive into everything around the draft this year, we're going to go over some off-season updates and introduce a few new guests as we talk about draft this season. So, Brooke, we had the NFL Annual League meeting happen over the weekend. What are some of the biggest takeaways you've noticed from that owners meeting?
Yeah, Bri, quick update from the NFL League meetings happening this weekend. The league is really going all in on global growth. We have 9 international games that we're going to see in this upcoming season, including 2 from us that we're going to be playing in Australia and Mexico. It's the first ever game in Australia, so that's going to be super exciting. And Bri, you've been to Mexico City, so talk about that kind of experience and what we can expect from that.
Yeah, the 49ers played the Cardinals. It was one of the most exciting games I've ever been to. I've had the privilege of covering drafts. I've had the privilege of covering Super Bowls, but I have to say, covering a game in Mexico City is at the very top of my list just because of the energy that all the faithful bring to Mexico that live in Mexico,
right,
because it truly is a 49ers town. I had the pleasure of being there all week. We don't know exactly if it's going to happen in 2026, but the 49ers were training at the Air Force Base and getting ready to that elevation difference when it comes to playing in Mexico City. So they're doing their training away from Mexico City. I was able to actually be in Mexico City that entire game week leading up to the Mexico City game against the Cardinals. So I got to see the 49ers culture be intertwined with the Mexico City culture and how big of a fandom there is out there. You turn down every street and it feels like you're in the Bay Area because you see Niners ovals everywhere. You see everyone in team gear. And if you're wearing team gear, it's automatically family. And they're like, hey, what's going on? You're a Niner fan. I'm a Niner fan. We're so excited to have the game in Mexico. So fun. I am so excited that the 49ers are going back there, and it's definitely going to feel like a home field environment, a home field advantage over there. The 49ers are the home team this year. You wouldn't have known that if you were there for that Monday night game because it definitely felt like home. But we're officially the home field team for 2026. But yeah, for Australia, that's going to be a Thursday game. What's interesting about that week 1 game, it's announced that it'll be September 10th. Kickoff is at 5:35 Pacific time, but there's a 17-hour time difference there. So the 49ers take the field on Friday at 10:35 a.m. in Melbourne. So the faithful will sort of be watching the future when they're watching that game because the 49ers will be playing on a Friday morning. However, it will be aired live just for America that Thursday evening. So really excited to see all the international games happening in 2026.
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting, and hopefully we can get some sort of 49er growth when it comes to down under, just as it is in Mexico City. So looking forward to that. Other first for this upcoming season, there's also going to be the first Wednesday night game ever. Seahawks will be kicking off on September 9th for that game. And as for other things going on in these meetings, kind of rules are the number one thing that people are looking out for, what's come out from that. So you have a few rules written down there. What's something that we should definitely keep our eyes on?
That's right. Okay, so the most notable playing rule changes actually surround kickoffs. So the allotment of onside kicks, the alignment of players on kickoff returns. The first one I'll note here is that the league will allow onside kicks to be declared at any time. The previous rule only allowed onside kicks in the 4th quarter. Another one, for 1 year only, to allow the NFL officiating department to correct clear and obvious mistakes made by on-field officials that impact the game. I'm reading verbatim here just so we don't get anything wrong when it comes to NFL rules. So in the event that there's a work stoppage involving game officials represented by the NFL Referees Association, that's when some corrections can be made. So anytime you see a rule be made and basically the referees aren't agreeing on a play that's said called or by a penalty that's been called, that's where the NFL officiating department could come in and help sort out that disagreement. So we didn't really see that in the past, but that's going to be a bit of a change in this season. Just a couple rules to look out for as we start 2026.
Yeah, the onside kick one is going to be interesting to see played out for sure. And then overall picture, I think one of the most exciting things coming out of this that has been confirmed is in 2029, the Super Bowl will officially be going back to Vegas. You have been there at Allegiant Stadium. It's going to go to SoFi Stadium next, and then we're going to see it in Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, then back to the Allegiant Stadium in 2029. So talk about how kind of that Las Vegas atmosphere is and what we can look forward to that.
Yeah, for a minute, it felt like the 49ers lived in Vegas or something because we had a couple training camps out in Vegas. We played the Super Bowl in Vegas, which takes longer than just that one game played on that Sunday. Teams are out there for the week before, and then media or marketing teams are out there for even a few weeks before leading up to it. So I'm like, okay, man, I've spent a lot of time in Vegas covering this team. But having the Super Bowl in Vegas just makes so much sense because I feel like that city was built for a Super Bowl. Everything is there on that strip. There's not a lot of movement. Everything is happening in one place.
A lot of entertainment.
It's a ton of fun for a Super Bowl, so I'm happy to see it back over there.
It's going to be super fun. And now kind of going into more 49er-centric, other things that have been talked about with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. What have you heard from them that's notable?
Yeah, definitely. So head coach Kyle Shanahan, president of football operations and general manager John Lynch, and Jed York, our owner, were all in Phoenix for the annual league meeting happening this past weekend. And some of the notes I took from all three press conferences were that off the top, talks with left tackle Trent Williams are trending in the right direction. Nothing is set in stone. No signings have been taking place with Trent. However, conversations are being held, and both Kyle, John, and Jed have actually shared that all of those conversations are going in the right direction. So great news for 49ers fans. All three of those people want to see Trent Williams in that Niners uniform. However, offensive line is still a work in progress for this roster. We lost Spencer Burford in free agency. Brooke and I were just talking about this before recording. I want to always call it the Oakland Raiders because I'm a Bay Area native. They're the Las Vegas Raiders. We're just talking about Vegas. But Spencer Burford went on to the Las Vegas Raiders during free agency. We signed Jones, Lowe, and Toth. However, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch mentioned there's going to be a bit of a competition at that left guard spot. So something to keep your eye on during the draft and a bit of a competition to watch heat up during mini camp, rookie mini camp, and training camp as we approach that preseason in 2026. Now, as for the rest of the roster and free agency that's happened in the past couple of weeks,
craziness.
They are so excited to see Mike Evans and Christian Kirk step in as veterans to that wide receiver room and sort of reshape the room. And what they loved is that both Christian and Mike chose San Francisco over other teams during free agency for their will and want of earning a championship in San Francisco. They love the culture that's been built here. They've talked to teammates on the roster. They've talked to all of the front office, and they notice a culture that's being grown here in the 49ers organization, and they wanted to be a part of it. So that's something that they've loved from those two additions and during free agency.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Shanahan even brought up how these veterans being added to the wide receiver room are just going to be great additions when it comes to leaders. And that seeing that growth in our guys that we do have on the roster now. And, these guys, both Mike Evans and Christian Kirk, have been battle tested. And so the fact that they can bring not only their talent, but their knowledge when it comes to the league and navigating injuries and navigating how to go about things like that, it's going to be only upside for that, only positives.
Brooke, speaking of injuries, there are a few positive injury updates coming out of the NFL annual league meeting from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. I'll start with Nick Bosa. It sounds like he's doing well in his rehab, and we should be able to see him in action at training camp. Now, this doesn't mean that he'll be full go on day one. He'll have a bit of a phasing process. However, it's good to see that he'll be back out there during training camp and that there's a green light there.
Love it.
As for tight end George Kittle with his Achilles rehab, it sounds like he should be back for week 1 in Australia, perhaps against the Rams. We don't know. Nothing is set in stone, and there could be things that come up in rehab just to make sure that he is full go. But we got a little bit of a timeline there with him being back for week 1. Nothing, again, set in stone, but good to see that he's doing well. And as for linebacker Dre Greenlaw, who is back with the 49ers, it looks like everything is good for him. No injuries on his end, and he is super excited to be playing back with San Francisco. Now, Brooke, the last time we were podcasting was actually in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. And you sat down with a few of our scouts and got to know a little bit of the behind the scenes process. So tell me what you learned from the scouts as we get closer and closer to draft day.
Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, the last time we podcasted was about a month ago in Indianapolis. So super excited to be back on here. But just talking to the scouts, I learned a lot, sights and sounds from there. You learn a lot. But actually having sit down one-on-one conversations, a few things stood out to me. I think number one, the process starts way earlier than we think. Obviously, it starts in August, but then they hit the road running for like 4 months. And they're all in their own separate regions. And the way that they describe how they go through all the prospects. It's kind of like a funnel rather than a discovery process. So they start out with a large number. One of those scouts told me that he starts with around 350 to 400 reports that he writes on individual players. And then throughout the season, it's about narrowing that down and eliminating and refining as we step closer to draft. And the ways they do that, obviously, are not only the stats on the sheet. The combine is a huge thing. The combine's more than just what we see on the cameras, because obviously that's more the on-field things. But there are 3 to 4 days of just interviews with players. They're not only interviewing the players, but they're also interviewing people that are close to them, coaches, families, friends, just to get a really deep understanding of how this player thinks, how this player moves, what type of teammate this player is going to be. I think for the 49ers is so important because we're so big on culture and how well of a fit that this prospect can be in that locker room. Another really big thing, versatility is huge. The more a player can do, obviously, the more valuable they can be. But if they can switch between different positions, is huge when it's coming from a scout perspective, right? You get later down the season, someone gets injured. You know, we've seen a lot of our rookies this past year have to step up into positions. So I think that's also a really big thing. And then another thing, I think just the 3 things that they look for. So personality, we have learning ability. How fast can they pick up a playbook and learn it? Is also really huge because you're coming from college ball to NFL, the professional world, and that's not easy in and of itself. But then having to pick up and really understand it and digest a playbook is no easy deal there. So learning ability is huge. And then the third thing, like I kind of mentioned, the identity and how well you fit into the 49ers culture. I think something that was really cool that one of the scouts told me when I asked him on, why we're so good about finding gems and, all of our rookies are such great guys and such great players on and off the field, and what is really that superpower for them. And he said back, he was like, we have such a great connection and relationship with our coaches. They have an open door policy, quote unquote. And I think that's our superpower. That's our 49ers superpower. So all great things are great guys, our scouts and our coaches. So these great guys are going to bring on great guys onto our team. So overall, all really great things. And Bree, you even had the opportunity to talk to John Lynch. Anything that came from those insights in that conversation?
Yeah, I want to speak about that open door policy that you mentioned that you talked about with the scouts. And Jed York talked about it at the owners meeting this past weekend, in that he has trusted Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to build that atmosphere here in San Francisco. Yeah. Because Jed York, he also has a ton of other ventures he's looking at, whether it's soccer teams that are overseas or other insights that are happening in Ohio. So he's got a lot going on. And so he's trusted Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and they've been doing it for almost 10 years now together as a duo. They're coming up on their 10-year work-anniversary as head coach and general manager. A great duo here at the Niners. And I think that trust just trickles down throughout the entire organization, going down to those scouts. So it's really cool to see how the IGYB, I've got your back, not only is shown on the field, but it's shown inside the organization as well. But in my conversations with John Lynch, he hit on how important the draft is. Year in and year out. He says it every year that their lifeblood is the draft, and you can't have sustainable success without hitting on those picks. So we've got 6 picks this year. It was 7. Brooke, I think you have that full list of where we pick. First round, second round, fourth round. Give us the full details on what that looks like.
Obviously, we have first round projected to be 27th as of now. Second round, we have the 58th pick. And then third round, obviously, we traded our pick for Osa. Super exciting. But then the fourth round, we have 4 picks. 127, 133, 138, and 139. Yeah. So all great numbers. Definitely a lot less than we had last year, but still a great number. So definitely some eyes to keep out looking for that.
Yeah. And so John Lynch, he just really hyper fixated on how important it is to hit on all those picks. Yeah. He also gave us a little bit of insight on where potentially the 49ers might go. He wanted to address defensive line, and he said that he will address defensive line. However, these conversations were had during the combine, and this was before the free agency frenzy, when the 49ers traded that third-round pick for defensive lineman Osa Odigizua from the Cowboys. So we have Osa in the fold now, but that doesn't mean that they still really want to fortify the 49ers defensive line. Yeah. He also expressed a ton of interest in Eddie Pinheiro. And so we signed him in free agency, and we also signed punter Corliss Waitman, who last played with the Steelers. So a few moves have been made since those conversations with John Lynch. But as we're looking towards the draft, there are analysts across the league, from college football to the NFL to all those sites that we see online and as we scroll through social media, doing mock drafts. And mock drafts take place from the minute the Super Bowl ends all the way until names are being picked on draft day. And I actually could say that they could go beyond that, because they're starting to mock draft what will happen on day 2 and day 3. Right. And then I think mock drafts happen even for 2027 as soon as the draft wraps up. But as we've looked at mock drafts throughout the course of the offseason, they've been pretty varied as we started. We saw wide receiver, we saw defensive lineman, we saw offensive lineman, cornerback. I think every position was mocked to the 49ers as we closed out the 2025 season. And as we've slowly made our way to draft month in April, it's getting a little bit clearer as far as analysts say. Now, as we go through a bit of the mock drafts that have been made throughout the offseason, I'll have to say this, is that this isn't what the 49ers are going to do. We have
let's just flag that.
We have no idea what Kyle Shanahan, Raheem Morris, John Lynch are going to do on draft day. However, this is what some of the analysts are projecting for the 49ers. Now, the biggest name that stands out as far as this week is offensive tackle Caleb Lomu out of Utah. I've seen this from NFL.com, ESPN, CBS Sports, Fox Sports. Pretty much every outlet is mocking Caleb to the 49ers. But it's not just Caleb we see. That's just the biggest name I've seen, and the one that's been trending throughout this beginning week of April.
And there's other offensive tackles being named as well. That's just like one of the ones that we keep seeing.
Yeah, that's definitely a name that's been highlighted a ton to the 49ers. But as far as offensive tackle, we've also seen Blake Miller out of Clemson, and a bit on the D-line too, edge rusher Keldrick Falk from Auburn, and Caleb Banks, a defensive lineman out of Florida. So definitely it's looking like a pick is going to come from the trenches if analysts were our GM and we're picking for the 49ers. So a few names to keep your eye on as we get closer to the draft. Now, as we are talking draft and we're getting closer and closer to that date, we have a few guests on in today's episode. So I'm going to kick it over to Bryant McFadden, and after he talks a little bit about his insight as a player and giving some perspective on what this year's draft looks like, we also talk to college and draft analyst Dalton Wasserman. So check out these guests right here. What's up, faithful? We're sitting down with CBS Sports football analyst Bryant McFadden. I'm sitting with Brooke, and Brooke and I are going to ask you some questions, Bryant, about this year's draft. And before we dive in, we want to take it back all the way to 2005 when you were drafted out of Florida State. What's that process like, from the combine to pro day to finally hearing your name called?
It's a unique process. First and foremost, to be able to go through that process, you got to really tip your hat to everything that you did to get to that point in terms of high school athletics, collegiately, and then, of course, getting ready for the pre-draft process. So it was unique. It was different. I think the most enduring part is not knowing where you're going to go. Getting drafted is the total opposite for me when I was going to college, because I picked the school I was going to. With the NFL draft, you can't pick. They got to pick you. And they pick you where they see fit. So outside of knowing where I was going, everything about the draft process, man, I really loved. I loved the opportunity to compete. I loved the opportunity to see some of my teammates that I played with, other guys that I knew throughout the collegiate ranks get drafted as well. And not just seeing those guys get drafted, some of the guys that landed as free agents that were able to make the teams. It's a very, very tough part just to be able to get to the National Football League and staying there. But it's something that I would never forget, a monumental moment in my career.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we were just at Indianapolis for the scouting combine, and I overheard that it was also your first time at the combine since being a part of it as a player. So what was that experience as a player? Kind of give that insight at the combine when, you have so many coaches and so many eyes on you, going back to when you were a player.
Yeah, correct. That was my first time there in Indy in that format since February of 2005. And at that time, the combine was in the RCA Dome. Now, of course, in Lucas Oil Stadium, but the RCA Dome was the site of my combine. And I just remember, man, getting my sweatshirt, getting some gear, getting my schedule, because I don't know exactly where the prospects stay now, but we stayed in a hotel where it's actually like a train inside of the entire hotel, and all the meetings with all the teams happened in that very hotel. And I had late night meetings. I mean, after you did the medical, before you got on the field to do some of the drills, you had all the meeting requirements. And I remember staying up late, talking to this team, to that team. You walk into a room and it's like 30 individuals in the room, not including yourself. So it's full to capacity, and so many different people are asking you questions. And the thing about my process, there were a lot of people who were asking questions. I didn't even know what their ties were with the team. I knew all the head coaches, of course, and the defensive coordinators, but there were a lot of guys that were just in the background, were just asking questions. I'm like, bro, I don't even know what your role is, but I gotta answer your question to the best of my ability, because hopefully that helps me get an opportunity to land with the organization.
Right. Those meetings can be strenuous. We were there at the combine, and they run late too. It was going to about 10, 11 o'clock, and coaches and scouts were talking about how they still have meetings. So it's pretty crazy.
Late and early too.
Yeah, it's intense. So major props for not only being drafted, because only so many players get to do so, but for having such a spectacular career with the Steelers and also your brief stint with the Cardinals. But you're on the 49ers podcast for this episode, and I want to hear your thoughts on how the 49ers closed out that 2025 season, making it all the way to the divisional round, and then some of the moves they made during the offseason, most notably that signing with Mike Evans.
Well, let's go back to 2025. I don't know if there was another NFL organization that had to battle through the adversity that the San Francisco 49ers faced in 2025 in terms of injuries to key components on the team. Offensively, defensively, it felt like every other week, San Francisco, they were losing guys, and still finding ways to win was unbelievable. And I said this time and time and again on the set, CBS Sports HQ, every Sunday or Monday, anytime there was an NFL game involving the San Francisco 49ers, I said I felt like this year, past year, 2025, was the best coaching year from Kyle Shanahan outside of the 2 seasons where they reached the Super Bowl. Because of what he did and how he did it. With just think about some of the guys they missed. Bosa, Brock Purdy. I mean, look at all the wide receivers that were missing time. George Kittle. I mean, you can go up and down the roster of big money players, 5-star players that were missing time, and he still found a way to keep his guys together, dialed in to win the necessary games to get into the playoffs, playing in arguably the most competitive division in the NFL and the NFC West. So I understand, I know for San Francisco 49er fans, the season didn't end as planned, right? There will be only one team, one fan base that will finish the year smiling from ear to ear, and that's the team that wins the Super Bowl. But outside of not winning the Super Bowl, being able to win meaningful ball games, be relevant, get into the playoffs, and you lost to the eventual Super Bowl champs on the road. I mean, it was a difficult year, but it was a very, very appeasing year, being able to do what they did with less and still found a way to get into the playoffs and compete it.
100%. I mean, you also mentioned, what Kyle and co were able to pull off in this season. And now looking at draft and the prospects that are coming through, anything that sticks out to you, anything that you personally are looking for and something that would fit in Kyle Shanahan's scheme?
Well, for me, I think when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers, just knowing the organization, well, I don't know it as well as you guys do because that's your heart, that's your soul. But San Francisco has never been shy to draft big men in the first round, right? Defensive linemen, you might sprinkle in an offensive lineman here and there, but defensive lineman has always been a usual position that they target in the first round. And I think you have to really, also wide receivers as well, wide receivers. But I tend to go with the big men because you have depth concerns when it comes to the edge rusher position. Mykel Williams is coming off an ACL injury, right? Bosa is coming off an ACL injury. Bryce Huff, unexpectedly retired. I don't know how expected it was for the organization, but us from the outside looking in, it surprised everyone. So you're talking about three major components on the defensive line that are called to put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. You got to address the depth concerns for their defense when it comes to the edge rushing position. So if I was, John Lynch, that's the position that I'm targeting. What I think 49ers, they're 27th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep,
27th. I think first round, unless there's an unusual player that falls, maybe a Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. If he falls to 27, he is the best player on the board. I think for any organization picking in that area, you go get him, especially with George Kittle having the season-ending injury that he had. But if Kenyon Sadiq is off the board, you look at some of these outstanding edge rushers, defensive linemen that can put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. I think that's the position that you should target if you're the San Francisco 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
And John Lynch was cooking this offseason, bringing in Mike Evans, bringing in Christian Kirk for the wide receivers. He also brought in a few O-linemen. He traded for Osa Odigizua. So we're going to have a little bit of fun here, and we're going to put you in the position of John Lynch. You gave us a bit of insight, but say you're in his seat for the end of this month, and it's the draft. What are you doing at number 27, given the state of this roster?
It depends on who's available. All right. There are a lot of notable defensive line guys that could be available at 27. TJ Parker, talented defensive lineman from Clemson, could be available. And now also, too, I haven't really got my ins and outs about this new defensive regiment out in San Francisco with Raheem Morris, now being the DC. Will we see more of a 3-4 concept, or will it be mostly what we've seen with 4 down linemen, playing defense for the San Francisco 49ers. So not understanding and knowing the concept just yet, I think you got to look at guys that are interchangeable that could either rush with their hand in the dirt or potentially rush standing up. TJ Parker is a guy who's very, very athletic. I think he will be a better pro than collegiate player. You look at Keldrick Falk from Auburn, very, very athletic, skillful guy as well. He could be available around in the late 20s. And also, too, you can't turn your back on interior defensive linemen as well. I think that could be an area for the San Francisco 49ers, a guy like Caleb Banks. Now, I understand he broke his foot in Indy, but when you look at the tape while he was at Florida, when he hit that light switch, he was dominant, very, very dominant, especially being coached the right way. I think he could excel and be able to be a great, impactful player in year one. And I do believe he will be healthy once the season starts. The same fracture he had to his foot, I actually did while I was at Florida State, and I missed a few months, but I was ready to go. I broke my foot in January, had surgery, got a rod and a screw still in it to this day, and by the month of late May, I was up and running, ready to go. So Caleb Banks could be a guy, but I think maybe a guy like TJ Parker could be, potentially available for San Francisco. Another name I like to throw out could be a second round option, Gabe Lucas. From Illinois. He's a double-digit sack guy. And those are the guys that I love. When you talk about being able to put relentless pressure on quarterbacks that play on Saturday, you just have that it factor. You know how to do it. You know how to get it done. He's shown the ability to do so, playing in the Big Ten, very, very disruptive guy. He's not a one-trick pony. I understand pass rushing has been his specialty, but he does a great job against the run as well. And you talk about having depth concerns at the edge rushing position for the San Francisco 49ers. If you want to go a different position in the first round, who knows? Maybe Gabe could be available in the second round. And I think he would have a really nice rookie campaign, knowing what his skill set is and knowing how important it is to put pressure on opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely catching all of the faithful's attention, because a lot of those names are listed in a ton of the mock drafts that analysts are doing from all the way at the end of the Super Bowl as we work our way to the 2026 NFL draft.
I forgot one name, Akeem Mesidor, also from Miami.
There you go.
Yes. Yeah. Akeem Mesidor could be another name, too, to look for at 27.
We're definitely getting our notes down. But Bryant, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. And we look forward to seeing all the moves that are made later this month.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Love that player insight.
Thanks again. Have a great one.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right, Faithful. Joining us now on the Saloon is college football and draft analyst, co-host of the Preferred Walk-On podcast, Dalton Wasserman. Dalton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate you having me on again, guys. I mean, you talk about the draft coming up only a few weeks away. It's going to be a lot of fun here in a little bit.
That's right. So last time we chatted was at the NFL Scouting Combine. What do you think of the moves the 49ers had made since? There's been a lot of action over here in Santa Clara, signing wide receivers Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, bringing back Dre Greenlaw, trading for Osa Odigizua. What's your feel on this roster post that free agency frenzy?
I think one of the goals for every team is that going into the draft, you want to leave yourself some flexibility, right? So you don't feel pigeonholed into having to take one position or just, what people think your biggest need is, right? So you talk about filling in on the defensive line, going and getting Dre Greenlaw back at linebacker, filling in at wide receiver with a couple of different veterans there, gives them the flexibility, especially early in the draft with pick 27 to go, okay, we can still improve any one of these areas, but we don't have to go in some certain order and force a player who might be lower on a board, on their board. So giving them that flexibility to go, we can really make a choice of just the best player at any position for our football team. That's really what a lot of teams want to come out of free agency with, feeling like going into the draft.
Definitely. And since you've covered a lot of college games and you've seen a lot of college players go through this draft and the combine, is there any player that has stuck out to you on a Saturday that you're like, man, this guy's going to be great on a Sunday?
Oh, wow. I mean, so many, right? Especially when you look at the top 15 to 20 players in the class. But the guy that stuck out to me that I've watched for the last 3 years is Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. Ever since his true freshman year at Alabama, he's been honestly the best safety in the country. He's just, his football IQ is so far beyond his years. He's got all the tools. He's a great tackler. He's not quite built like, say, a Kyle Hamilton or a Derwin James, some of the other great safety prospects we've seen over the last half decade or so. But this kid is a leader on defense. I think he's one of the few players in this draft. It's not considered a top heavy class, but he's one of the few guys to me that can change the complexion of your defense and of your team. I know there's going to be a position value argument about safeties, but man, oh man, he's worth a top 10 pick. He's so good.
Yeah, I love that.
Now, looking at the entire NFL world, zooming out from just the 49ers, as we are the 49ers podcast, but I want to hear, what are some of the biggest storylines you're tracking in this year's draft as we get closer to draft day?
I think, to me, it's teams with multiple first-round picks. I believe we have 5 of them: the Jets, the Browns, the Cowboys, and the other 2 I'm losing off the top of my head at the moment. But, 5 teams, I believe it is. Miami's another one with 2 first-rounders, and Kansas City, that's the other. I knew I'd get there eventually. But 5 teams with multiple first-round picks, right? And I think in a draft here where you have a lot of quantity, I think, beyond the first 10 or 12 players, a lot of the talent starts to even out. Curious what teams do, especially with the second pick there and how they want to build it. What order? I'm always curious what order of positions, if they're looking at 2 or 3 positions, how do they want to go about that? How do they go first, right? Especially a team like the New York Jets picking second overall. How do they want to attack that position and then go about 3 other picks in the top 50? So I'm always intrigued with teams with multiple first round picks, multiple top 50 picks, say 3 or 4 at a time. A team like the Dolphins has 7 of the top 100. Got a real chance to really remake your team early in the draft here, but those are always the teams that intrigue me, teams with multiple first round picks.
Definitely. And we're pick 27, so we're definitely looking forward to draft day when it comes to that. But speaking more on 49ers and our identity, bringing guys like Mike Evans and Christian Kirk to our room, how would you describe that identity that the 49ers are building offensively?
Yeah, you always want to have veteran leadership too, right? And both of those guys, both former Texas A&M Aggies, they bring that leadership. They've been around, they've seen everything, right? Mike Evans won a Super Bowl in Tampa, and he's done so many things over there for what, 13, 14 years. So, when you really talk about those veterans and bringing along the rest of what's a pretty young team, especially on the defensive side, I know it's a different side of the ball, but it's a lot of youth on that 49er team, and they still had a really successful year last year. So you bring in some veteran leadership to teach them really how to play in those big games like the Seattle game at the end of the year, and even in the postseason, right? Getting through those moments and learning how to win. Because yes, they were in a Super Bowl not that long ago, but NFL turnover, we see it. You get these rosters turning over every single year. A third or even half of the roster can turn over at any given time. So to have that, and then to usher in a new era of this new winning window they're trying to get to and get back into Super Bowl contention, it's good to have those veterans in the room to lead that.
100%. You talk about these veterans stepping up and being great role models for the rookies that are coming into. But thinking more draft-wise, say you're in the 49ers draft room right now. Are you going best player available, or are you going targeting more of a specific need? What's your take on that?
To me, it's always a combination. I mean, if there's a player you fall in love with that fell to 27, you go, okay, that's the best player on our board. He can change our team one way or the other. We got to have that, right? But I look at the 49ers, I really look at it flexibly, right? You can look at 2 or 3 different wide receivers that I think could fit the mold and be added in with the veterans that they have. I think offensive and defensive line, every team is going to scout those guys and figure out how they can get better in the trenches. You know, we've heard so much lately about the Trent Williams situation, right? Could they think about investing in a left tackle of the future for the first time in a long time with Williams' contract situation and his age, right? And then the defensive line as well, being last in the league in sacks last year. I think pass rushers, and there's a ton of good ones in this draft, especially off the edge. Pass rush is really going to be a priority, as we've already seen even with the Oso Odighizuwa trade.
Now we're going to put you a little bit on the spot and say you're writing a mock draft right now for the beginning of April. Which prospect would you target to number 27 coming over to San Francisco?
Wow, narrowing it down to just one. That's really putting it on the spot there. I can't even cheat with 2, can I? Okay, I'll go with one. I really this is one we've talked about before, but I think KC Concepcion is the type of guy that can add a different dynamic to their offense, right? I like Mike Evans, I like Christian Kirk, and I like Ricky Pearsall, right? So it might seem like, okay, that's overkill, but I think Concepcion is a different type of player than all of those other guys, right? Mike Evans is the classic big-bodied receiver. Ricky Pearsall, kind of that movable role he can win in the intermediate range, but Concepcion with the ball in his hands is just dynamic, right? The screen game, working horizontally across the field, added more of a vertical element to his game this year at Texas A&M, and he also brings dynamic special teams value. He was one of the best punt returners in the country, so just somebody Kyle Shanahan can play around with all over the formation, and he even had experience in the backfield at running back in his time at NC State. So you talk about just one of those kind of positionless sort of weapons that Shanahan can put all over the place. KC Concepcion, to me, is a guy that would be a perfect fit in his offense.
We know Kyle would love that pick. A follow-up question on KC Concepcion. We saw Sky Moore leave during free agency. Is he a sort of guy that could fit into a special teams role?
I mean, he certainly could, you know, when you talk about more in the ability that he had as a punt returner, and KC also, you know, if you bring in a guy like that, that is a part of the skill set. I think you got to take it into account. I think about a guy that the Chicago Bears drafted last year in Luther Burden III, where you go, yes, this is a dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands on offense, but adding in that second phase, you know, we saw it from the division rival, the Seattle Seahawks, the trade for Rashid Shaheed. That was really the biggest impact he had on special teams. So when you look at, you're always, even whether it's in the first round or top 50 or even later on in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, you're always looking for guys who can help you out in any way possible. In special teams, it can flip a game in one play. So you're always looking for that.
Awesome, Dalton. Thank you so much for joining us and your time and insight on the 49ers podcast. We appreciate you as always, and enjoy draft season.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on again. Thank you.
Of course. See you soon. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of The Saloon. Stay tuned for more as we have weekly episodes leading up to the draft, talking to more analysts and more reporters from around the league.
That's right, Brooke. So a lot to be excited for this month as we work our way to draft day. Brooke was right on the money. We're going to have a bunch of guests from around the league. And as we get to the draft, we're going to be talking to the draftees themselves. So you make sure that you're subscribed to The Saloon presented by Cisco on YouTube, SiriusXM, and all your 49ers platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're going to be everywhere this month, so make sure to keep up.